Hey everyone, so typically the first thing that I do when I get a new orchid or I buy a new orchid or someone trades me an orchid and it's potted, the first thing that I look at is the potting media. I want to get in there, look at the roots and everything. So today I wanted to share with you the components of potting media for orchids and all the components and how to mix them together to make your orchids thrive. Stay tuned. Okay guys, thanks for checking me out today. So I'm gonna get straight into it. There's so many different components for orchid mixes, right? It's sometimes overwhelming. You don't know whether to grow in bark or grow in sphagnum or do some kind of inorganic media. I don't know whether or not I should mount this plant. So it's a lot of confusion. So I'm gonna try to make it very simple for you guys. I'm going to show you 3 different mixes that I use that use the same 2 components. I'm just switching out the 3rd component pretty much every time. When I get an orchid, I want to take it typically out of its pot and at least take a look at the roots. Sometimes it's very hard if it's overgrown in the pot where you can't remove it, or if it's in a basket, it's very easy to inspect. So here are 2 main components that I mix in my orchid media. The first is sponge rock or perlite. This is added to the mix. It's actually like volcanic glass, and so when it's heated up, it expands. Okay, it's added to orchid mixes for aeration. It's that way your roots can get more air, so we want air getting to the roots. We don't want it staying stagnant. It does also retain a little bit of moisture, okay? The next component is charcoal. Now, I buy this charcoal it's 100% natural organic charcoal. And sometimes it gets very big, but I just sit outside, I bang it up with a hammer. Charcoal is getting very, very hard to find now, so I took matters into my own hands. It was a lot cheaper that way, and also I can grade it into coarse, medium, and small, and then maybe some fines also that I add into my seedling mix, which I'll get into a little bit. So those are the 2 main components that I do. I do sponge rock and charcoal. Now the 3rd component is typically what I change out depending on what I'm planting my orchid into, okay? So the first is regular orchiata bark. You know, a lot of you guys will notice this mix. This is predominantly the orchid mix for everything across the board. You can grow dendrobiums in it, you can grow phalaenopsis, you can grow oncidiums, many different orchids you can grow in, okay? But what I do also is I will switch out that bark for LECA, lightweight expanded clay aggregate. Some people call it hydroton, some people call it clay pebbles. You can find this stuff at any hydroponic store, okay? It's very easy to find. I think I get mine like a 40-liter bag for $30. So it's not that expensive. It's about the same amount as buying orchiata bark. Now I'll grow my cattleyas and my dendrobiums, certain sections of dendrobiums I should say, in this clay pellet charcoal sponge rock mix. I grow my phalaenopsis in the bark mix, and some of my pendulous dendrobiums I'll even go a step further just for extra water retention, and I'll add coconut chunks. Okay. A lot of like Dendrobium monosmum, primulinum, Parishii that I just did another video on. So check out my Parishii video. This is what I grow in there. So I'll use my coconut chunks, my charcoal, and my sponge rock for all my pendulous dendrobiums from the dendrobium section. Now, you can add extra stuff to these three components if you want a little extra water retention. If you don't, just adjust. It's all personal preference. That's the main thing. If you ask 5 people what they grow in and they have 5 different conditions, you have to figure out what works for your growing area, okay? This is what works for my growing area, but I try to keep it simple with 3 different kind of orchid medias. And that way, I'm not going all crazy. I don't have to buy like 10 million things. All I have to do is buy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components. Maybe more. It just depends what I'm growing or how crazy you are. Another thing, sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss, I don't grow a lot in sphagnum moss. I will use it for my seedlings just because it has antibacterial, antifungal properties to a certain stage of its breakdown and stuff like that. So I'll use sphagnum moss for a lot of my seedlings, but I also have really fine orchiata bark. So this is bark, and I'll use that for a lot of my seedling mix because it does retain a lot of moisture. I will add some charcoal in there. I add charcoal because it kind of filters the impurities of all your media. When you're fertilizing, it kind of soaks up any extra of those salts and acts as a filter, so that way your media doesn't get sour. It stays really nice, okay? But there is a certain point where you need to repot because it is getting too many impurities or too many salts from your fertilizer in there. Another component, and a lot of times I'll add this in the bottom, just in the bottom of the pot for a filler, is lava rock. Okay, so sometimes I'll even grow in straight lava rock. There's different grades. You have large, you have medium, and smaller. So, and you can find red lava rock just about at any store in America now. Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware. Go to your local nurseries. They'll probably be able to sell it to you by like a 5-gallon bucket full or however. But support your small mom and pop businesses first, okay guys? So what I'll do is I'll actually put lava rock in the bottom of the pot and then put my plant just to raise it up a little bit so I'm not using all my good mix to fill up the whole pot. Plus the lava rock gives it really good drainage. It helps retain a little bit moisture in the bottom of the pot, so it helps those roots grow down. And I know some people, I don't use this, but I know a lot of commercial growers that use it, and even some other people that grow straight up in it, is stay-lite. Okay? So stay-lite is like it's like a gravel, it's like a rock. It does hold moisture, guys. Just because it's a rock doesn't mean it doesn't hold moisture. I found it holds too much moisture for my greenhouse, for my watering routine, and I just don't use it anymore. I will use it in the bottom of a pot, kind of like lava rock, but I had some left over from another project that I was trying to do, and go about it that way. So how do you mix all this stuff? For me personally, I like the sponge rock, charcoal, and LECA hydroton mix. I grow a lot of dendrobiums, and so you can see my dendrobiums do very well in this inorganic mix. It's not going to break down, okay guys? even though the charcoal is wood, it's not going to break down like your regular bark, okay? It's going to kind of retain that shape, and if it does break down, it's going to break down in small pieces that kind of get flushed through the pot. But that way I grow in it, because when this 4-inch pot is full of roots, I can take it straight out of the pot, put it in a bigger pot, not worry about all those components of the media, of the old media, breaking down and rotting out my roots, and to where then I can grow nice big healthy plants. Whereas if you grow in any kind of organic media, like the sphagnum moss, like the coconut chunks, or the pine bark, you have to worry about those components breaking down, getting mushy, and creating more of a soil-like media as time goes on, okay? Because it's going to rot, break down. So those roots that had all this aeration to them before is going to be starting to suffocate them as the media breaks down, and that's why it rots the roots and your plant starts having issues with fungal or bacterial issues by rotting the roots, okay? The reason I grow a lot of my seedlings in this sphagnum moss, and I just do it in straight sphagnum moss, is because I'm worried about just growing the plant, okay? Because in another year, I'm gonna have it up potted, maybe even 6 months, I'm gonna have to up pot it, and all those original seedling growths are not gonna be with the plant 2 years, 4 years from now. So they're gonna get cut off, they're gonna die back, and then I'm gonna have a nice healthy plant. So the main thing with the sphagnum is getting and growing that plant very large enough to where you can start to establish it into a nice plant. And then depending what type of plant it is, I'll plant it in the appropriate mix. So on my bark mix, I'll plant a lot of stuff in. I plant oncidiums, I plant cymbidiums, I plant phalaenopsis, and I'll show you a good one in just a minute. And some other smaller genera that likes a little bit more water retainage. My Hydroton sponge rock charcoal mix is a very fast draining. So this next mix is kind of a medium draining. It still drains good, but it holds on to a little bit of moisture with the bark mix. I plant a lot of my phalaenopsis in straight bark. I don't use any sponge rock or charcoal. It's easier just to throw it in there. And you can see this was repotted about 6 months ago at the beginning of 2020. And you can see just how big the plant gets. I don't like using sphagnum moss. It retains too much moisture for me. I like to water my phalaenopsis almost daily, okay guys? And you can see just how crazy it's blown up. And it's actually blooming. It's blooming in March. So I get 2 bloom cycles per year out of my phalaenopsis this way, okay? So the third mix that I want to talk about, which is the coconut husk chips, retains a lot of moisture. Now with the coconut husk chips, you have to really kind of soak them before you use them. And I typically soak it for, you know, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And because it's very dry and it's a very, very tight, you know, coconut. So what I do is I'll typically soak it for an hour, 30 minutes to an hour, and then I will use it to pot. So I pot certain orchids in my cocoa chip charcoal sponge rock mix. A lot of them are dendrobiums that I grow in baskets. And this is a very good basket mix because it retains a lot of moisture, but throughout the day the basket gets a lot of air movement over it, so it does dry out a little bit, but it holds on to that moisture, okay? So I'm going to show you a couple plants that I grow in this coconut. So as you've seen in one of my other videos, this is Dendrobium parishii. You can see it's in a basket, but I do grow it in the coconut husk chip mix. They love this mix. This allows their roots to really intertwine. This gets watered daily, and I can grow very big and well-established plants in this. And up next I'll show you one of my Dendrobium monosmums. So here's my Dendrobium monosmum. You can see that it loves the coconut chip mix. It's a very big plant. It's a very established plant. There's the back side, but it tends to grow one way. I've had it in this basket since the beginning of the year when I repotted it, when I saw new growth starting to emerge. And as you can see, the canes are like 3 feet long. So they look over the size of my arm. So they love this mix. They get watered every day, and I have probably about 5 of them, and this isn't even the biggest one. So watering every day, a really water retentive mix inside a basket though. I do have some that are in pots, and they do just as well in clay pots. But I like the basket. I like the natural look of this plant, Dendrobium monosmum. So here's Dendrobium Peterson by Night of Stripes, and you can see it's a very nice dendrobium. But this is one that I have growing in straight lava rock. Okay. Now, if you grow in straight lava rock, you're going to have to water more often because it just drains very fast. Lava rock will retain some moisture, but not when it's big chunks, okay? So remember, you can grow plants in straight lava rock. You just have to accommodate their roots by watering more frequently depending on your climate. And last but not least, you can always mount your orchids. If you have not watched my mounting orchid tutorial, go check it out. It's about 8 minutes long, and I go step by step how I mount an orchid. And as you can see, you don't have to use any media. So if you just want one way to grow things, you can always grow them mounted. You don't have to buy any kind of components. You don't have to buy any kind of pots. All you have to do is buy some nice hardwood. In this case, I use Pecky cypress, and you can just see how lovely it makes the plants look, and the roots just grow through it. You can use cedar, any kind of cypress, but make sure it's a hardwood. Don't use pine, don't use oak, okay? Another orchid mix I want to talk to you guys about is my terrestrial orchid mix. So basically, I use my bark charcoal perlite mix, and then I pot the plant in that for any terrestrial orchid. Okay, so Aaron, the bamboo orchid, for any of your ground orchids, you can even use it for Phaeus, for my Peristeria elata, the Holy Ghost orchid that you guys have seen and I've talked about a lot. So what I'll do for my terrestrial mix is I'll use my bark mix, which consists of pine bark, charcoal, sponge rock. I'll pot the plant in with that media first, and then I'll take some regular potting soil and I'll sprinkle about a 1-inch layer, half an inch to a 1-inch layer on top, and then I'll water that in very well. So the potting soil will kind of seep into the existing orchid media and create a nice terrestrial mix. It'll retain a lot of moisture, and I find that that works best for me. I haven't had any issues with it, and maybe I can show you my Arundina graminifolia. Okay, everyone, this is my bamboo orchid, Arundina graminifolia. You can kind of see the tiny little cattleya-like flowers there. It's very pretty, but you can see how it loves the bark mixture. Now I do have some lava rock in the bottom here, okay? but then I have the bark mix with a little bit of soil on top. So it creates that nice layer that you would naturally find in the ground. The roots like it, and I think it's happy. So I'm gonna make a video on repotting this one that should be coming out soon. So that's everything in a nutshell, guys, about orchid media, how different types of media, how different components can all come together with just 2 components and switching out the 3rd component. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Check out my next video over here. Have a great day. Happy growing.